Well, first of all, you're not making up. That's exactly right. That's exactly what's going on. And to just kind of explain that, there's an old joke, but I'll tell it just because it's funny if you haven't heard it, but it's actually true. So there's the old jokes. There's 100 guys in the bar, and Bill Gates walks in, and on average, everyone's a billionaire. But there's actually only one billionaire in the room. His name is Bill Gates. Everyone else is just having a beer. So the point being, almost all the government statistics, not all of them, but almost all of them, are averages. Okay, it's information. You can do trends. You can do all your analysis, your regressions, and all that stuff. But averages hide as much as they tell you. They tell you something, but they hide a lot. And what they hide is called the degree distribution, meaning an average of what? What is any average? Well, it's a bunch of numbers, add them up, divide by the number of numbers, and that's the average. Okay. So when you see unemployment, or you see CPI, or you see real wage increases, et cetera, or, I'm going to say CPI or inflation number or a lot else, those are averages. Well, what's in the average? Let's just take CPI, for example. I mean, you have to be a geek like me, but go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics and look at the press release and look at the calculation. So that the CPI might be the Commerce Department, but I said Bureau of Labor Statistics. But the Commerce Department, it's a government website. It's easy to find. Well, in that CPI calculation, there are 100 or so subcomponents. Big ones like gasoline, but eggs, bread, butter, clothing, automobiles, furniture. Then even broken down more finely than that. And some of them are going up, some of them are going down. That's normal. But you have to look at that. But so when it comes to income, people say, real wages went up by, 1%, nominal wage increase minus inflation, real wages went up 1%. Sounds good. It's not a lot actually, but sounds good. But what you discover is that some people, their real wages are soaring and everyone else is falling behind. So the average may be up 1%. But when you look at the degree distribution, you say, okay, what are the top 10% making? How's the bottom 10% doing? What about the middle, 60%? How are they doing? You can even break it down, like you say, 10% brackets or whatever, and look at each bracket separately. And then break it out further, but what's happening in urban areas, rural areas, et cetera. Again, I'm down in the weeds, but my point is, while the average may be kind of okay, the degree distribution is awful. All of that money is going to, a lot of it to stockholders, CEOs, government officials, and some, tech entrepreneurs, et cetera. It's all good, but that's a relatively small slice.
Jim Rickards delves into the hidden realities behind government statistics, emphasizing the deceptive nature of averages. Using the example of the Consumer Price Index, CPI, Rickards highlights how averages can obscure significant disparities in income distribution. While headline figures might suggest modest improvements, a closer look reveals that gains are concentrated among a select few, leaving the majority struggling. Rickards criticizes the Biden administration's disconnect from these economic realities, citing recent campaign blunders as evidence of their lack of understanding. The interview provides a sobering analysis of the widening wealth gap and the challenges faced by everyday Americans.
Whereas everyday Americans, blue-collar workers, small business owners, restaurant workers, healthcare workers, nurses, et cetera, they're just struggling. I mean, they might be getting a raise here and there, but it's not much. And then when you subtract inflation, it might be negative. So the only caution I would drop, Matt, is that the numbers aren't great. They're like, okay, but the reality is worse, because when you go behind the average to look at how it's distributed between the rich and everybody else, you'll find that so much of that is going to the rich. Again, CEOs, stockholders, money managers, defense contractors, government officials, Nancy Pelosi, a small slice, and everyone else is being left behind. And that's why there's so much discontent. Biden, I had difficulty attributing anything to Biden because he's so cognitively impaired right now. He doesn't know where he is. I don't know if you saw the clip of him in the Wawa the other day. By the way, I live in New England, but I kind of grew up and spent a lot of time. My family still lives in the mid-Atlantic states, New Jersey, where I went to high school, Baltimore, where I went to college, went to law school in Pennsylvania. So I know that area pretty well. And they have this store called Wawa. But if you say that, and they're great stores. But if you say that to anybody anywhere else in the country, they're like, "What are you talking about? Is that like a Native American tribe or whatever?" So Trump the other day, Trump can't leave New York because he's on trial, in a criminal trial. You have to show up. You can't just wander around. So, but he's been campaigning in New York City, which is about as blue as you can get. And the other day he went to a bodega in the Bronx. And they loved him. We went to a couple of bodegas, and they loved him. They're like, "Oh, Mr. President, Donald Trump, yay!" And by the way, these are Black and Hispanic voters. Those are the people who live in these areas who Trump's visiting and go to the bodegas. Jill Biden, by the way, Dr. Jill Biden gave a speech a couple of years ago, and she said bodega. And I was like, "What the heck's bodega?" But I realized that she couldn't pronounce bodega, which is, Spanish. That's how you say it. But I was like, man, I don't know what you got your PhD in, but it wasn't linguistics. So she's like, the bodegas. I'm like, what? Oh, but that shows you how kind of out of touch the Bidens are. So, but anyway, this campaign visit for Trump was a big success, and the Biden campaign's freaking out. They're like, wait a second, Blacks and Hispanics are coming to Trump, and they are. That shows up, particularly Black men and Hispanics across the board. That shows up in the numbers. So the Biden campaign said, well, we'll do the same thing. Well, so they go to a Wawa. First of all, Wawa is not a bodega. They're nice stores. I shop at one when I visit my family down in Cape May, but they're kind of large. They're not particularly crowded. They got a fresh food section, a deli, whatever, but they're not bodegas. Bodegas, if you go to, I went to one in, where was I? Miami. And it was late at night and I needed something. I just went into one, and, it was, the aisle was so narrow that only one person could go in the aisle at a time, because it wasn't room for two people to pass each other, and the stuff was piled high. That's a bodega. No, but Wawas are kind of big, and but they actually had a rehearsal. The employees rehearsed what they were going to do when the president came in. Nobody was in the place, I guess, for security reasons. Okay, well, you need security, but in a big store that's empty, it's not exactly a crowd that's trying to hug you and say, "Way to go, Donald Trump." This is like, it was completely empty. It looked like a Twilight Zone episode. And then Biden had his tip in his hand in advance because he couldn't do the math or like reach in his pocket and make a tip. They had to like put it in his hand and say, "Mr. President, here's your tip." And it was just, the whole thing was pathetic. But the point is, that's how these campaigns are playing out. No, I mean, the Biden administration doesn't have a clue. They don't understand anything we've been talking about on this interview. So it's pretty bad.